Hi, welcome back to Audit Lectures. We're going to start with Chapter 7. We did already talk about Chapter 7 a little bit in class, but I'm just going to start from the beginning. That seems like an entirely different world ago. So, Chapter 7 is the last chapter we need to finish before the exam. And so you can go back to your old lecture notes and look at modules B and C in Chapter 6. So Chapter 7 is going fully online from the beginning of the chapter, even though we already looked at it a little bit live in person. Alright, so with all these next few chapters, doing an audit, it's really important to remember inherent risk times control risk times detection risk. You may recall this. I used to write this on the whiteboard practically every time we met, right? We want to keep audit risk very, very low. Audit risk is the chance of getting the audit wrong, all right? Inherent risk is the risk that just exists. So for each audit cycle portion, we'll talk about what are the inherent risks for this part of the cycle. Control risks. Well, your client that you're auditing should have some controls in place, right? They want their financial statements to be fairly presented, so there should be some controls in place that we test, right? So we keep audit risk very, very low. That's what we want. We want to get the audit right. There's some risks that just exist, so we need to understand what those risks are. There's some control risks. In other words, the client's controls won't effectively prevent or detect a material misstatement, right? So we need to check for those risks, and then we do our substantive tests, and it's with the substantive testing that we can adjust our nature, extent, and timing of our tests to help us keep audit risk very, very low. All right, so throughout the next couple of chapters, we'll be referring to different parts of the audit risk model as we go through, because we're trying to find any material misstatements, and we need to understand the risk of material misstatement and adjust for it using our nature, extent, and timing of our substantive tests. All right, so keep audit risk model in mind as we go through the chapter. All right, so this is the revenue and collection cycle at your client, right? So your client is earning revenue through some sort of operations. That's the idea. And we are going to make sure that the revenues and the associated accounts are accounted for properly on the financial statement. So we're going to check for material misstatements in any part of the revenue and collection cycle. And so accounts we're going to be checking, of course, are the sales revenue and those affiliated accounts. Things like accounts receivable, the allowances for doubtful accounts and the write-offs, any bad debt expense, returns, discounts, things like that. So in this cycle, we're not just checking revenue. There's some other accounts that we are auditing. So understanding the revenue cycle is super important, right? So the first thing we have to do, get those inherent risks understood. So we need to understand what risks are in this cycle. Okay, so at your client, here's the basic activities, right? This is what goes on in the revenue and collection cycle. They receive an order, maybe a purchase order, maybe somebody walks up to the cashier with the thing they want to buy, right? At HEB, you just go to the counter and click your thing and it goes beep after waiting in line and being very careful, right? So, receiving and processing customer orders could be online, could be through electronic transmissions through our SAP systems, could be an old-fashioned purchase order mailed in the mail. But anyway, you receive some kind of order from a customer. A customer wants to buy something. Then you deliver the goods or the services to that customer. You have to bill them for it to get the money. So now you'll have some accounts receivable to deal with. Collect it, deposit the cash. So all the accounts involved with doing all that, and there's a lot of side accounts too, right? If you have accounts receivable, you're going to have some that don't get paid, right? So you have an allowance, so you have bad debt expense. So all of these activities have accounts associated with them, and they have accounts we're going to have to audit. All right, so we do have a system we'll be able to use to look for our customers and see what's going on. So you and I as auditors will download information from our customer system. So our customer system is going to have all of these parts that you might need to get some data from, right? As a sale occurs, all of these different files are going to get touched by the accounting system. It'll gather data, it will send data, and because what we're doing is auditing the data, we need to understand where it comes from and where it goes, right? So when an order comes in, it gets entered, and then it goes into the processing process. So it's got to check and see, is the inventory there? It's got to check and see the accounts receivable master. Who is this? What's their address? Do they have that much credit? Right? Can we give this to them on credit? The price that is being sold at, is that the correct price? Right? Think about how many SKUs there are of products at HEB. There's a master list, right? As you beep that thing across the scanner, it's touching the master list to see how much is that, and it returns that. So every time a sale occurs, right, the system has to go out to the master price list. If you're not shopping at somewhere like HEB, if you're HEB ordering from vendors now, right, things are so backed up and crazy, things are on back orders. So somebody who might be an HEB ordering things from some kind of a big vendor like Procter & Gamble, right? They'll have to put it in a pending order master, a back order master. Procter & Gamble might put that in there, right? Then you'll do the accounting, right? There's going to have the journal entry and then post to the ledger. So all of these areas are places we could go for data, right? Because think about it. If there was an error in the price, that would make an error on the financial statements. If they're saying something that's on back order is actually a sale, right? If they got the order in, posted it as sales revenue, but it's really on back order, that's not revenue, right? So we need to understand what's in all the different files available to us. And of course, the system is checking the data and it creates these reports. So you and I can look at these reports, things like invoices, back order report, sales reports, accounts receivable listing, things like that, statements. So the system checks the data, it performs the sale, and it creates reports, right? So when a sale comes in, the process is check the data, use that data to finish the sale, right? If this thing's in stock, we can create a packing slip. We can send it out to the customer, right? So order comes in for a purchase, data gets checked, sale gets completed, and reports get made. So as auditors, we can look at the databases and look at the reports to help us understand what our clients are doing, right? So that's part of understanding the inherent risk. Where in this process could things go wrong, right? If things are getting into the sales journal while they're still on back order, that's a place where something could go wrong, right? So we have to understand our client's process so we can think about inherent risks, right? So this slide just tells us different places we can go to get our audit evidence, right? We're going to go do testing, get evidence to help us understand. So we might go to any of those files. back order, customer file, price list file. All those files and reports I just showed you on that flow chart, those represent places you can go get data as an auditor. Alright, here's my favorite thing, Audit Risk Model, right? So, typically, we're going to make sure our audit risk is very, very, very low. Audit risk means we got the audit wrong. We said these files are, these financial statements are fairly presented when really they're not, right? So, we want that to be very, very low. We want like less than a 5% chance of getting that audit wrong, alright? So we want that very, very low. So in order to do that, I assess the risk of material misstatement, right? So I understand my client, right? I understand where the files are, what that client's process is for a sale, right? And once I understand that, I can think about what are the inherent risks, right? And so when I understand the inherent risks at my client, then I can go say, well, what controls should the client have in place? And now I can go look for those controls and test those controls, right? Control testing, right? So I can test those controls. And now I have a better idea of the risk of material misstatement. Inherent risk times control risk, risk of material misstatement. Once, as an auditor, I understand what the risk of material misstatement is, now I can come in and adjust my detection risk, right? That's the only thing I really have any power over. What tests I do to find those material misstatements. So I can adjust the nature, extent, and timing, NET, nature, extent, and timing of the test. Nature, what kind of test I do? Do I do a confirmation or do I just do an inspection, right? Confirmation with a third party, do I go look at something, right? So what kind of test am I doing? Extent, how much, right? So in this chapter we'd be talking about perhaps account receivables. So one way to verify account receivables with an audit test would be to just go voucher trace them, right? Go to the client system and voucher trace. Well, if some sales are faked, vouching or tracing might still come up with everything being okay, right? Because they faked the purchase order, they've faked the sales invoice, they faked the, it's like they faked it. So what a better test would be to do a confirmation, right? Where you contact that third party. Do you really owe my client this money on this account receivable, right? So that's the nature. Do I do just vouching or tracing, or do I do a confirmation? Once I've decided to vouch or trace, now I can do the extent. Well, do I take a small sample, right? Do I just test 10? Do I test a huge sample? Do I try to do all of them? Right? So that's the extent, how many. Then the timing, all right? So timing is when do I do it? If I do it early in my audit, before the financial statement date, so let's say I come in September, start doing my audit, and I audit those accounts receivable. I only know through September. I have to do some roll forward work, but I'm kind of assuming the controls are going to work, right? But maybe I feel risk of material misstatement is high. I don't rely on the controls. Well, now I wait till the financial statement date to do my test because I can't rely on the controls to do things in the interim. All right, so that's how using the audit risk model works. And in our next video, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about applying this audit risk model as we go through our audit of revenue and collections. All right, so I'll see you on the next video.